Hi again. Let's continue talking about React Native. And in the last video, we ran our project in the iOS simulator on the desktop, or you might be using the Android simulator. It should work the same way. Um, and I'm editing my project here in Atom. And let's just do a quick review. So far, we've got our basic React component. This is the default component. Um, in React, all components must render themselves as a block of JSX. So JSX is these HTML-like tags that are written in JavaScript. So JSX extends the JavaScript language and gives you this HTML-like syntax that you can use. So you notice we don't have to put this in as a string and concatenate all these things, right? We can just write the HTML directly inside regular JavaScript. And all of this is written in regular JavaScript. This might look different to some people. This is using the ES6 version of JavaScript, so it has this import from statement and this kind of class descriptor here, right? But essentially this is JavaScript, okay? For packages that you import, if they belong to the node modules here, or if they were imported with npm, you can just use the name of the package. Okay, there's two packages that are important. We need the React package and we need the React Native package. Okay, in regular React, when you write these HTML tags, you're allowed to use any of the default HTML tags that exist in webland or in the browser, the ones that the browser understands, right? And that would be things like div and h1 and paragraph and ul, like all these guys, right? In React Native, we don't have any of those, right? Those are not allowed, right? Or at least it doesn't recognize them, okay? React Native gives us a whole set of tags that map to standard UI elements or UI objects that mobile devices use. Okay, and we can get all of those tags from the from the React Native package. Okay, and in the example here, we're getting the style sheet object, the text object, and the view object. And I'm using the view here, the text object here, here, and here, and then style sheet we're using to create a style sheet. Essentially, the styles object here can just be a JavaScript object, but they give us this stylesheet.create method, and I think this kind of validates our style sheet, so it's kind of good to use this because it kind of checks a couple things. But essentially, we could assign just this object here to styles without create or style sheet create, right, without this, and it would still work, okay? But I think this gives us, I'm not really sure why they have this, but I think they have it to validate and kind of check our style sheet, right? And it's kind of a good thing to have. So anyway, that gives you kind of the lay of the land there. Let's talk about a couple other things. So there's actually a whole bunch of other tags that you can use, right, that you can import here, and you can also make your own. So if you make your own component, you can import that, and then this would be, like my component, right? So if I made a component, I could say like my component, and I could put some properties in it, like title equals something, and if I wanted to pass other properties, I could pass them down. So if you're familiar, this is the same process used with React, okay? So it's exactly the same process. So essentially, in React Native, we're writing components exactly the same way you'd write them for the web with plain old ordinary React. The only difference is that the tags that we're using have to be tags that come from React Native. Okay, like we can't use the standard HTML tags. Okay, so let's take a look at the React Native docs. I'm going to go back to React Native here and click on docs. Right, I'm on the web here, and this shows the basics. So it's a whole section on just getting started. So it's got like learn the basics. You can learn about props and state. Right, so if you're familiar with React, props and state work the same way. Here's a section on the style sheet. I was missing a couple things when I explained the style sheet earlier. I should read this again, right? So maybe I'll make that my homework. And then it talks about layout, okay? And I'm going to talk a little bit about layout in a minute, right? And we'll talk about Flexbox. This is a really important concept, okay? Next, they give you some guides down here. And then there's a guide for iOS and a guide for Android. So in general, most of the features are the same across iOS and Android, but there's a couple things that are different. And these two guides kind of walk you through that, and they kind of explain what's different between the two. Okay, so you can read this, and then down at the bottom here, if I keep going, there's a section called components. So these are all the native components that you can import. And right now we've imported the text component and the view component, right? So that's where we got those. And if I look here, let's see. It doesn't show style sheet here because it's not really a component, but it's also comes from this library, right? And if you want to use any of these other features, you can just import them. So for example, if I wanted to import the button, right, I could import that at the top here. And if we click on button, it'll give us a description. So it says, hey, basic button component that should render nicely on any platform, supports a minimal level of customization, right? And they give you some examples of what the button looks like. And on Android, a button's going to look like this. And on iOS, the button's going to look like this. Okay? And then they give you some properties here, and they give you some sample code. So you import button from React Native, and then you define a button tag, and you give it an on-press, a title, and a color, and an accessibility label. Okay? And they tell you what all the props are. So these are all the props, right? They're only showing you 3 or 4 of the props there, but it has a few more. And then they give you some reference, and they give you the whole rundown on the component, right? So if we want to use a button, we can include it. Let's try that, right? So first thing is we need to import the button. So I'll import button up here, and then what I'll do is I'll make a button tag here, right? And a button should have a title, right? And actually, since in React, anything that is an expression, like a JavaScript expression that's a variable or a function call or something, we wrap it in the curly braces, but for these attributes or properties, we're allowed to assign anything as a string. So it can be a string, or it's a JavaScript expression, in which case it goes in the curly brackets. But if it's a string, we'll just use the quotation marks, right? And let's double check. Yeah, so button has a title property, right? And we'll put the title in there. We'll say hello button as our title, right? And then when I refresh, or when I save my file here, it should refresh in the simulator, and it gives me the button at the bottom here. And then I get a warning at the bottom here that says, warning, failed prop type. The prop on press is marked as a required in button, right? So I'm supposed to include the on press property here, and the simulator is kind of warning me that, that I should be including that. If you get warnings like this and they're just yellow, that's okay, you should take care of them. Sometimes the screen will just go red when you make a mistake. Like if I leave off the slash here and I save it, I get this red error, and it says syntax error, it tells me where my project is, and then it says expected corresponding JSX closing tag for button on line 12, and then column 6. So if I go in here and I look at line 12, and I get over here to, to column 6, it's expecting that I have a slash closing button tag, right? So I mean, it kind of saw this and it thought like, oh, I might be encompassing this one, but I need to close it right before I get here, because the tags can't overlap, right? So it kind of saw that I could be closing it anywhere, but I should be closing it here. If you have a self-closing tag, you can just put the slash like that. So if I do that and then I save, then it should refresh. Actually, it's not refreshing, so we can say reload, which is Command R. It's kind of hard to read there, but it says reload, right? Command R. So I'll do Command R here in the simulator, and then my project is running again. Okay. So don't worry, you'll get the red screen every once in a while. It's a little scary, but I don't know why it does this thing here. I'm not going to worry about that. But anyway, there we go. There's another introduction to React Native, and that was the button, and how to look up things in the docs, and how to create a new tag and set props on the tag, okay? And then how to, kind of deal with errors and warnings in the simulator, okay? So thanks for watching, and I hope that this is informative for you.